Welcome back. This is Daybreak, the state of the nation. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Later, we'll sample some of your feedback here on the broadcast. Let's now turn our attention on events in Parliament yesterday. And the papers say, tighten your belt as lawmakers endorse 16% VAT on fuel. 184 lawmakers from the Kenya Kwanza side approved the raise, while 88 Azimio lawmakers from the opposition voted against the proposals. And the chair of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly is with us in studio here to tell us more about the consequences and the ripple effect this will have in terms of productivity in the country, with the government now focusing on what it says is upscaling its revenue streams and cutting down on borrowing, or rather ending the appetite for the borrowing or the begging bowl culture. Honorable Kimani Kuria, the concern that the opposition had was the ripple effect this will pose on the economy. And the consensus among many economists is that this will further push the cost on the consumer, who will need to move the products from point A to point B. What informed your support, for example, for the upscaling of the VAT on fuel from 8 to 16%?
Thank you very much. First of all, there was there was a decision to increase the VAT on fuel from 8% to 16% in the 11th Parliament. Okay. But what the 11th Parliament did, they postponed the with effective date to some other, to some other time, that they kept postponing it. We have three tax regimes in terms of VAT in Kenya. A product is either zero rated, tax exempt, or VATable. If it's zero rated, we know you claim input tax from your output tax, and then the difference you pay to Kenya Revenue Authority, or they give you a refund. When it's exempt, you do not claim your input VAT from your sales. When it's VATable, there is one VAT rate in Kenya, 16%, apart from fuel. So what this essentially meant was that the dealers in this particular sector of the oil sector will pay their input VAT at 16%, but their output VAT is at 8%.
Okay.
So this difference of this 8% is what they were claiming from government. And what essentially meant is that it is taxpayers' money that was bridging this 8% difference. And that is a fact. There's no difference between putting VAT on fuel at 8% and every other VAT at 16% and the fuel subsidy the last regime was doing. And see what happened with the fuel subsidy. Despite the political, and I call it the political pronunciation, on that fuel was being subsidized, there was no any money that was put in for it. In fact, it is the budget of 23-24 that has put the first payment of 25 billion shillings that we appropriated now last week to paying of that for that particular VAT on fuel. So we were just subsidizing the difference from taxpayers' money. Secondly, many Kenyans asked us, look at the other tax components of fuel. And out of the many taxes that are involved in fuel, we actually looked at two: the Railway Development Levy and Import Declaration Fee, and we actually did a reduction on those particular two components. And people are asking, then why don't you reduce the others? Members of Parliament across the political divide would know that part of that levy that is collected goes to maintenance of roads in all the 290 constituencies. Because before, I don't say this during Moi's era, for example, you had to go and queue in a minister's office to get funds to do maintenance of the roads in your constituency. Nowadays, there is an equitable distribution, what you call 22% and 10% in all constituencies in this country. So you couldn't touch any of those, because the ripple effect of that will not be able to do regular maintenance of the roads in all the 290 constituencies, despite where those roads are. Secondly, there's a global discussion about climate change and about going green. And many countries across the world are moving away from consumption of fossil fuels to consumption of clean energy. And so what the committee did, in addition to the deduction of radio development levy and import declaration fee, the tax components that are involved in the cost of fuel, was look at what are their alternatives.
Okay.
Talking about things like bioethanol fuel, which we zero-rated. We're talking about bioethanol stoves, which we zero-rated. By that effect, and I'll give just an example of a simple product like Cocoa Energies, that you are able to get a cooking stove for only 1,520. With zero-rating that particular product, it means those stoves will cost much less. How much does it cost you to cook with that particular bioethanol fuel? 10 shillings for a meal of 4. What are the other alternatives of energy? LPG gas, which we zero-rated. In terms of movement of transport, in terms of use of fuel for vehicular movements, for example, you will notice that most of the people nowadays who are buying new cars are buying hybrid cars. Cars that use both fuel and are chargeable. So we did provide tax incentives to now manufacturing of those electric buses, electric motor vehicles, and electric motorcycles, so that we move away from the fossil energies to go and with time now we go to use of clean energy.
Thank you. On the 26th of July last year, the then presidential candidate of the UDA party, then Deputy President William Ruto, said there are many levies that we need to do away with in terms of taxes on fuel. And he was concerned about VAT on fuel largely. Here you have upscaled it from 8 to 16%, which will inform the cost of production of electricity, because that increases by 7 shilling the fuel cost charged per unit FCC, and we use diesel to generate electricity. Now we are still pushing that cost to the consumer. We'll come to the LPG aspect, because you'll determine, the president says Nimutungi, and then there's the content, so we'll talk about the price determination. But how about the ripple effect this will have on FCC per unit, which will be 7 shillings increment in the cost of electricity production in the country? Did you think about that?
We actually did, and I really want to say that the president is someone who keeps his word. He actually said that we're going to look at the taxes involved in fuel. And we actually looked at those two taxes. RDL yes. and IDF, and we actually did reduce the two taxes components that are involved in the pricing of fuel. And on VAT, I think I have really taken my time to explain the difference, because what was happening were the ones who were subsidizing it. And on energy, you have seen the president sign agreement after agreement on climate change. And these are discussions that are not happening just in Kenya, but these are global conversations about green energy, about going green. And that is why you've seen deliberate efforts in the bill, both as initially proposed on the bill and with the amendment that we actually did propose, to provide incentives to move away from fossil fuels, to go into solar energy, to go to biofuel, and all those are technologies that are now coming to change now our reliance on especially fossil fuels.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable John Mbadi. Well, what's your account? Because you have also pointed out a violation of the PFM Act, which you said there was inconsistency, no parallel between the presentation of the budget and when the committee had presented its report following the stakeholders' hearings and the public participation exercise. And generally now, the increment in VAT in fuel, from 8 to 16%.
Thank you very much, Ayub. First, you know, this is my professional junior. But we respect each other a lot. But, you know, when he talks about input tax and output tax and how we have been subsidizing the cost of fuel, he's speaking like we are manufacturing fuel in this country. We don't. Actually, if the VAT on fuel is 8%, it is 8% across. When you're buying it, when you're selling it, it's 8%. So there's nothing like we are buying it at 16% and then paying VAT at 16% when we purchase, and then when we sell at 8%. VAT is charged by the government of Kenya. And if it is said that VAT on petroleum products is 8%, yes, it is 8% at the point of purchase and at the point of sale. So his argument does not make sense to me at all. Maybe what he is referring to would be other consequential value additions on the fuel. But if you look at the cost of fuel, the other elements of it, like transportation, and is very negligible. And I would want to tell you that the 8% that we fixed on fuel was X of these levies that he's talking about. Actually, it is one product where we did not peg the VAT on the total quantum of the purchase or the purchase price. We removed the levies like fuel development levy, etc. Yeah. And by the way, fuel development levy has no connection with VAT on petroleum products. It is charged on the price of the fuel without the VAT element. So I don't see why he's trying to sensationalize and say that we need roads. And so VAT on fuel is something different. It is a totally different tax. We deliberately made it X of all these other levies. But reduction of railway development levy is a welcome idea. But how much is it compared to how much Kenyans are going to lose in terms of when the price of fuel is increased by 8%? I would tell you that the ripple effect is so serious, and it will be seen in a number of days.
What will be the ripple effects, for example?
The ripple effect is the cost of everything will go up. You know, Kenya is still heavily dependent, and that's why I want to persuade him away from this discussion that, yes, we signed the climate change. But you cannot sign climate change and move away from fossil fuel overnight. It is not possible. Kenya is a country that cannot just move away from fossil fuel. It has defeated even the most developed nations.
India, Australia, China.
Yeah,
I mean,
it has to be gradual. And you cannot make life so expensive and difficult for Kenyans just because you want to fulfill some obligations or some treaties that you signed somewhere where even public participation was not sought. So the ripple effect, we all know, the cost of transport will go up. The cost of, when the cost of transport goes up, the cost of basic commodities will go. There will be general inflation, even beyond what we see. And so, in my view, I think this was not well thought out idea. In fact, when this VAT on fuel was first brought at 16%, Parliament rejected it. And when we rejected it, the President went and vetoed. But in the memorandum, members were very hostile to that memorandum. And we had to negotiate. Actually, the 8% was a negotiated percentage. The President wanted it as, the President then, President Uhuru Kenyatta, wanted it at 16%. We wanted it at 0%. But we arrived at the middle ground. Now, even after campaigning on the platform of removing these taxes, the President comes again now to tell us that even 8% is still low. We need to increase it to 16% at a time when Kenyans are facing the worst economic crisis in terms of cost of living. I think it is irresponsible, and yesterday, in my view, was a very sad day for me in the National Assembly.
Yes. Dr. Khalwale, what then do you make of the raft of other contents in the bill? Because this, according to many observers, the increment on VAT, the increment of VAT on fuel is largely going to have consequential effects in, I mean, the general economic status, because the LPG gas has to leave Dr. Khalwale's home to reach Kuria Kimani's home. The cost of transport is involved. To reach Mbadi's home is still involved. And largely that will be pushed to a consumer that's already feeling the pinch of the current economic status.
One would be forgiven if he said that these measures that are being taken are bad, if one was saying it when we live in paradise. At the moment, we are not in paradise. We are living under very extraordinary circumstances that obtained because of 4 major issues, namely the post-corona recession, which is worldwide, affecting all the countries. 2, we have the impact of climatic change. Kenya is one of the biggest victims. 3, we have an impossible public debt obligation. And these things, if you don't manage them and continue assuming that you are living in a different world, then you will remain academic like our good friend, Honorable John Mbadi. But if you are managing a country, you take measures that will, yes, force you to move slowly, but as Confucius said, there's nothing wrong in moving slowly, so long as you don't stop. So, end of this financial year, come next financial years, the benefits will become evident because we will not have stopped. We will be moving slowly by slowly. It is true that it is very painful, but don't blame the one who is trying to redeem the situation and forget the one who caused this mess. And the mess, as I've said at the beginning of my remarks, is not to be borne by any individual. These were things that came, and they happened. We are there.
It's the responsibility. It's the responsibility of the leadership this country has had over time, over the previous governments.
Yes.
And you, as a member of the political establishment, who at in many instances, aside from when you were out of parliament, had exercised power, delegated from the people.
Yes.
What portion of that problem would you take? Because all of you sit in the bicameral parliament, and there must be responsibility from your part in terms of policies that are friendly to the people. And here we have problems because we just never got here from heaven. It's because of leadership that we are here, and a leadership that's trying to address a problem. Well, that's okay, that's fine. But what's the portion of the problem and percentage would you take as a leader in this country of what we are facing at the moment?
In fact, the best you can say that as leadership, we should say the buck stops with us. Last week, when the numbers were announced, 176 members of parliament, members of the National Assembly, took responsibility and voted yes. They said the situation is bad, we must do something about it. The other ones refused to take responsibility and started drama. If, for argument's sake, all members of parliament had voted no, then what would be the recourse? Were you saying the government should grind to a standstill? Honorable Mbadi knows that the government of the late Jomo Kenyatta had 15 finance bills which were passed. The government of Moi, 24 of them which were passed. The government of Mwai Kibaki, 10 financial bills which were passed. And the government of Uhuru, 10 of them which were passed. I have never, in my many years in parliament, and Mbadi was always there with me, gone to a debate of finance bill where there is celebration. Because it is bitter. Taxation is not a joke. If given an opportunity, many people the world over would want to live in a world where they don't have to pay taxes.
Okay, taxes must be paid. The country has to run. But we talk about the accountability of that tax. Yes, Honorable Mbadi, I'll come to you, Honorable Kure. Yes,
I was almost going to ask Ayub, you know, I'm alone. There are two. So probably the best you can do is to give me 1.5. But you see, Boni is saying I'm academic, but he's more academic than I am. He tends to think that if we are in a problem, and of course we are in a problem, that the solution is on taxing and taxing and taxing. Where is the evidence that Kenya Kwanza is making progress towards helping this economy? Where is that evidence? Their first budget has increased or shot up by 544 billion shillings. Since Kenya Kwanza came into office in September 30th, I mean, I'm working with figures of September 30th to March 31st. They have borrowed 689 billion shillings. Last week you added 213. The other week you had requested to do another 87.7 billion shillings. In a nutshell, if you compare that even to Uhuru Kenyatta, who has been vilified, the same period of September 2021 to 2022 March, the Jubilee administration borrowed 405 billion shillings. Compare that to 689 billion shillings. The excuse that you hear, and they are not disputing these figures because they are there, they are government figures. The excuse is that there was already a budget. Who says that if you found a budget and a planned budget deficit, that you must actualize it? In fact, the regime came into place very early in the year. There is nothing that stopped Ruto from restructuring the entire budget. He could do it. And I think, according to Duale, I mean sorry, I don't know why I'm calling Duale. Honorable Duale has been a very good friend of mine, so I think his name, I'm probably missing him in Parliament. But Senator Aluale, you know, I don't know where you are, the Alwali we knew as Mtetezi wa Wanyonge has gone to. Let us face facts.
Yes.
We are in a problem, we are in a crisis, but the solution is not tax. As a finance expert, and you know, when it comes to matters medicine, I would come to you for consultation.
Okay.
Matters finance, I would advise that, and in terms of financial management and economics, it is no country has ever achieved better growth with overtaxing the citizen.
Okay. Yes, Honorable Kimanikura. Yes.
You know, I don't know where to start from, but CPA Band here, and I call him my senior in the profession because we're both certified public accountants, but he has more years of practice than I am. But I'm surprised at some of the comments that he's making. Because let's first of all tackle the issue of debt. Part of why we have such a huge budget this particular year is to settle debts that were borrowed by the handshake regime. Because what those people were doing, when it came to a time to pay salaries, and there was no money in the exchequer, what do? They would look at who is the most available person to lend the money. So they borrowed from IMF, they borrowed from World Bank, they borrowed from locally. They borrowed so much that there is no legroom left. I am really perplexed at the remarks that he's making about the budget of this particular regime. And that's why I find the political hypocrisy of our brothers and sisters from the side of the other side of the political divide. Because on the night of Tuesday, up to around 10:50 a.m., we passed what we call the Committee of Supply that was giving money for budget. And every chairperson of the departmental committees, which was in agreement with the other members of those particular committees, which are drawn from the cross side of the political divide, approved that particular budget. The compensation we saw yesterday in the finance bill was not there when we were doing the budget. And you see, the appropriations bill or the budget estimates and the finance bill are conjoined. One is the expenditure side and one is the supply side. So Ayub, you cannot with a straight face say, I am okay with these expenditures, but I'm not okay with the revenues that are supposed to finance those expenditures. You cannot say that with a straight face. It's like at home. You cannot say that you are going to buy a house, and then now when it comes now fill the form here for a mortgage, or fill the form here for us to deduct this from your pay. Now you're saying, no, but I want the house. So we really need to be honest as Kenyans. This particular budget was passed by everyone across the political divide, and there was no compensation. Now, how would we finance that? We have only two options. You either increase taxation or you borrow. On the borrowing side, we don't even have an option because we can't even borrow. There is no leg room left.
400 billion to hit the ceiling?
Yes, it's only we have only 400 billion shillings to hit the ceiling. And for starters, even part of that particular budget that we're saying has overshot, 985 billion of it is to settle, it's to pay off debts. Were those 958 billion? Was that debt that was incurred by Kenya Kwanza? No. It was money that was borrowed over the years. So we found ourselves in a hole, and we have an option. Whether to get out of the hole or keep digging. And we have only two options. For example, the VAT on fuel, what we perhaps are not saying, is going to raise an additional 61 billion shillings. We asked our members from across the political divide yesterday, fine, give us what the alternative is to this 61 billion, because you did approve the budget yesterday.
Honorable Kurekeman, I'll come to you, Honorable Mbadi. Talk to me about this.
Thank you.
On the whole progress and process, what will the taxes as proposed in the finance bill, now passed, will raise in terms of revenues? I need the number.
Yes, initially, the proposals on the bill was to raise around 211 billion shillings. But after public participation, and that is the beauty of talking to Kenyans, we have very many brilliant Kenyans who have got very brilliant ideas. We actually realized that we could raise 100 billion shillings more, because there was a very interesting clause on the bill that was exempting from tax transfer of business as a going concern. And just by deletion of that clause, we were going to raise an additional 100 billion shillings. So as a result, the amendment finance bill as passed yesterday will actually realize an additional 311 billion shillings.
So you'll be getting more than 300 billion Kenyan shillings.
Yes.
In revenue.
Yeah, and that is just on the amended finance bill, not on the current. I don't know on the current. I'm saying now the differences that you've made in the finance bill that will raise an additional 311 billion shillings, which is 100 billion shillings more than what was initially proposed.
Okay.
In the bill.
So that is roughly 300 billion Kenyan shillings. Because I want to tie it to the cost of corruption, Dr. Khalwale, and that's where the responsibility is, owing to reports that were issued by relevant state agencies in the country. You talked about borrowing, Honorable Kuria Kimani. And data from the National Treasury here in my position shows that the new administration, Kenya Kwanza, tapped loans worth 452 billion Kenya shillings in the 6 months to March this year from October last year, which is more than the 434 billion Kenya shillings that its predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta's government, borrowed in the same period earlier.
Come up again, sorry?
So data from the National Treasury shows that the new administration, Kenya Kwanza, tapped loans worth 452 billion in the 6 months to March this year from October 2022, which is more than 434.6 billion than what Uhuru Kenyatta borrowed the same period.
Thank you. Two things you attribute to this. First of all, if you look at the budget policy statement that was read in the financial year 23-24, we're anticipating actually to have a borrowing of around 800 billion. In fact, it is 900 billion. That was what was anticipated.
824.
824. That was what was anticipated by the budget policy statement for last financial year. And then secondly, what is the uniqueness of the financial year 2022-23? And we must all appreciate the uniqueness of this. We are going to elections. So what happens in a year of election? And I keep saying this, it's a painful thing, and I really hope that with time you're going to change this. When we come to elections, it's like we fold our country and now get our country back way after the elections. Because of how heavily that particular election was contested, because of the event that happened after that, not the Supreme Court, but especially the Mandamano Mondays that followed, we had everyone shy away from investing in Kenya. We had businesses that wanted to expand, that wanted to recruit, just shying away from doing that. So as a result, it's like we were not in business for months. We were actually at a standstill. And what did that do? When you do Mandamano for a whole Monday in Nairobi City, the city that gives us the highest GDP, where we collect the highest amount of revenues per day, it means our collections will drastically reduce. When we are on the news across the world that Kenya is quote-unquote burning, we do not have anybody wanting to come and invest with us. If we have that, even if we went to borrow, now our cost of credit goes high. Our exchange rate takes a dip. And all these things, and especially because we are actually a net importer, our balance of payment, we are net importer. It means that when that affects our exchange rate, the cost of everything that we import goes way higher than what was budgeted for.
Okay,
but we're hoping that now, having now gone back to normalcy, and I would really for this thank our Azimio brothers and sisters, that we are agreeing the conversations that we are supposed to have, let us have them in the right place at the National Assembly and at the Senate, and let those decisions be made there. With that normalcy being seen, and with the positivity now we are seeing in Kenya in the global market, we are going to see a lot of changes happening now in the country.
Thank you. Dr. Khalwale, briefly before we go to Honorable Mbadi. Okay, before I come to you, you had a thought, Honorable Mbadi?
No,
on what he raised.
You can go first.
Okay, yes, Dr. Khalwale, please proceed.
Yeah, I think my brother Mbadi is not being fair to us. Whereas it is true that we are two, but it doesn't mean that we are sharing a common brain. Huh?
That's why I've yielded. That's why
he delegated that.
Thank you very much. So
and I respect you as my senior.
When you tell us, senior, that the only thing that you are seeing us doing is increasing taxes.
Yep.
Are you really being honest? You know very well that we are working on ensuring that things get better. What are we doing? We have given out fertilizer to farmers. Farmers have used it. In another few months, there'll be a bumper harvest. We are doing something positive. Number two, in this same bill, which you guys just want to describe as a VAT bill, we have measures there that are making sure that manufacturing is improved in this country, including local production. What are we doing? Things like iron products that are imported. Now we are saying let them pay more tax. If we import cement, pay more tax so that local production can be spurred. What is more, even in simple things, Buddy, you know where you come from, fish. We have made it more difficult for somebody to bring in fish from China so that we cushion the local fishermen, up to and including my brother, even I think it is in the media. We are now bringing in more innovative species of tilapia that grows faster, that is cheaper to produce, and in the process, you are spurring the industry. And then finally, Buddy, also in that bill that you don't like very much, we are attempting to create jobs. We're going to create a lot of jobs in the construction industry purely because of the innovation idea of building more houses for our people. In fact, I can't wait for those houses, Kimani, because for the first time, when I visit my cousins in Kaongware and in Kibera, they will not have to worry how I will relieve myself when I want to go for a short or long call, because this is the aim. Of this,
Dr. Khalwale, you talked about manufacturing. Towards the tail end of Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency, Professor Ngumi, whose task force looked into the exorbitant electricity prices in Kenya, had pointed out deep-rooted problems at the Kenya Power and Lighting Corporation. And you know the price at which IPPs are giving power to the Kenya Power and Lighting Company, and at which Kenyan also does. There's clearly a problem with the cost of electricity production. You talked about manufacturing. Then how practical is it when our electricity prices are high, then you talk about manufacturing, yet it can't balance because you have to bring down the cost of electricity to spur manufacturing? I mean, what will you do about the cost of energy in Kenya?
Yes, in fact, I'm aware in Parliament we have an aggressive process that we are trying to address the high production of, the high cost of electricity. The producers, the independent producers of electricity, they have been coming one by one before the committee of the Senate, and we want at the end of the day to have a global answer rather than coming to the TV station and talking about the prevailing situation.
But you appreciate the problem with the cost of...
Yes, the problem is there. And you know why it doesn't worry me? It is because whether you are comparing us to Uhuru and the challenges of Uhuru had, that which we seek is not in others. That which we seek is in ourselves. And that's why we asked to be given an opportunity to lead government.
Daktari, the point is that the task force was put in place courtesy of the taxpayers' money to look into an issue which is bothering the same taxpayers. And now the same taxpayers who gave you the mandate wants answers into that. It's a continuity. And as an intellectual, I would look forward to you appreciating the importance of reports by task forces for implementation purposes. Is it not worth referring to?
I do appreciate, and even more, I appreciate the principle of perpetual succession of government. That which the previous government started, we are under an obligation to make sure that either we write it or we complete it. So, because that which we seek is within ourselves, is not what is in them, we will not get discouraged by their failures.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Mbadi.
You know, first, I don't know where Honorable Kimani gets his figures from, but arguing that the reason why the budget is rising is largely because of the debt repayment. That is not very correct. Actually, what is planned to be spent as net debt repayment for the coming financial year is 775 billion shillings and not 956. So he has overstated that amount by 181 billion shillings for reasons I don't know. I don't know whether Honorable Kimani has looked at the debt portfolio and looked at the specific debts that we are supposed to repay. It is true that a lot of debts were taken in the last regime. I don't know where this title of handshake comes from. I don't know how many of us from Azimio's side, I mean Raila's side or ODM, for that matter, at that time, were in government. We were not. We could be friendly to government, but none of our people was managing government affairs. Let us be honest with ourselves. Actually, Ruto's team were in government up to the end, and they were running government affairs. Even if they didn't have powers, they were there. They could control things. There were ministers there. There were PSS there. So that is a big lie. But again, you see, the debts that we are paying, the most constraining debts, one of them is the 277 euro bond, which was taken in 2014.
And it's
was that
payment next year in June?
Yes. Was that handshake time? It was not. And in fact, we spoke to this, Ayub. I remember, if there's any one single member of parliament who kept on telling Kenyans that we were digging a hole from as early as 2014, it is me, and Hansard is there. There was a time I was even alone. Very few of us, I think, were even understanding where we were heading to. This Eurobond thing is what sunk this country to where we are, to its all-time low. If you look at even the debts that we took during COVID, which was a very difficult period of time, the loans we were taking that time were much cheaper compared to how when we went out there and accepted any commercial debt that came our way. But again, the question you want to ask when someone tells you that Mandamano Monday caused the economic mess that we are in, and that is why we have to borrow. Last week, we borrowed 213 billion. Are you telling me it is still Mandamano effect? And if you ask me, the answer is no. Yes, Dr. It is true that there are certain good provisions in the finance bill, but the bad ones outweigh the good ones. That was our assessment. In fact, you know, you lied to Kenyans, and I saw the president lying to Kenyans on television that we are removing taxes on 20 commodities. You know the commodities he was referring to? The exempt commodities. And almost all those commodities were zero-rated. When we pointed it out, his committee corrected them yesterday. And I was very vocal about the idea of removing items from zero rating to exempt and pretending that you are helping Kenyans because you are hurting them more. I want to say that there's some of these things, some of these decisions may look good, but they are still subject to serious discussion and analysis. Housing fund has even changed now. It's not a fund, it is a levy. And the framework, you look at it, in fact, I was even asking, we are going to take it to consolidated fund. Have we cushioned it? There is no law as yet. We still need, he tried to make some amendment, which to me was not a very serious amendment, to cushion it. But we need serious legal framework. Finally, you mentioned about fish, Bonnie, and I think that is a understanding of the fishing industry. In this country, we don't have a problem with the fish market. In fact, our production is way below. We need more fish. And those of us who consume fish a lot, we feel that if you stop at this point, importation of fish, what you are going to do is just to increase the cost of living for us, because the price of fish is going to rise. So before you take these measures on fishing industry, it may look very nice and sweet when you are telling fish farmers we are protecting you. But you are protecting them and they don't have fish. In fact, the problem with fish farmers is there is no fish. They go to the lake, they come out with nothing. So you need to help them restock the lake, help grow fish or do fish farming in this country, as opposed to these measures that you are taking of making importation. The moment we have local fish production in this country in good quantity, then we will not need to import fish.
Okay. Honorable Kimani Korea, you gave me a figure of about 300 billion Kenya shillings thereabout. And I want us to focus on the cost of corruption. I know you have a point to make. You will, of course, supplement it further. Because the taxpayers' money, to put it this way, is stolen. through dubious projects, inflated prices, and by government officials. So according to the government, we lose a third of our national budget to corruption. That's roughly about 720 billion, going by the number that the president former gave us, 2 billion a day. Mathematically, that's 60 billion a month, 720 billion Kenya shillings annually. If we are to address the cost of corruption, then it means that what you are entirely seeking as budget deficit hole would only be less by about 100 billion Kenya shillings. What are the policies that this government is looking forward to in addressing the effects of corruption and the bearing it has on our economic growth?
Ayub, the issue about prudent use of public funds is something that's very dear to myself. And I look forward to the time that the exorbitant thefts that we've seen in governments actually do come to an end. Is there hope? I dare say that only less than 10% of government officials have changed. So what has changed is the president, is the cabinet, the president, the presidency, and the cabinet, and the principal secretaries, those are the accounting officers. The procurement officers that engineer corruption have not changed. Neither has the accountants, neither has the finance officers. So you find the civil service that we had during President Uhuru's regime, where we are losing 2 billion shillings, has not changed. What has changed is the leadership. What has the leadership done? For once, we've seen a president who has taken action against people that have misappropriated government funds. We saw the KEMSA scandal the other day. And remember, this is not the first time that this is happening. You remember what happened after COVID, where billions of money that was meant for COVID was actually stolen. And we had admission that that money was actually stolen. Was any action taken? No. This time around, the officers that were culpable were asked to step aside, not were sacked. The correct word to use were sent packing. And people would ask, fine, even if the officers were sent packing, that money was not recovered. Yes. But what is the process of recovery of the money that was stolen? Again, that is another completely different legal matter that involves the DPP, that involves our courts, that involves EACC. And I'm really, and I've seen now progress being taken on that. We saw government officials making decisions on consumption of bad sugar. And the moment that came to the attention of the presidency, those people again were sent packing. And I have no doubt in my mind that anybody in this government who is going to misappropriate public funds is going to be sent home. And that, therefore, is sending a very strong message to all those officers across that this is not the government who you've been stealing from. This is different.
Okay. Okay, before you proceed to that point, it takes me back to the first portion of our discussion here. You said any government official who misappropriates public money would be sent packing. And we have seen the action that came from the head of state in regards to KEMSA. Back to the question on the Kenya National Trading Corporation. The entire idea as to why the cabinet gave the go-ahead was to lessen the price of commodities like edible oils and others below the current market price and what local manufacturers are at the moment selling Kenyans. Here you have companies awarded the contract. They brought in the oil at the international price, $20 per jerrycan, sell it at $26, 600 on top. Now KNTC has that dilemma, because if you sell that oil, then it means that the retailers will put on the profit margin, and then there is VAT, which must be charged. Then you will end up selling a 20-liter jerrycan of oil, more than even what local manufacturers are selling at the moment. And the cabinet was very clear, the president was clear, this is meant to level down the cost of living crisis in Kenya. This is a government agency. Isn't this very blatant? We have documents as to how the entries were made, even wrong in some instances, misplaced numbers of the number of containers that came in, no clear answers, yet people are laughing all the way to the bank.
You know, Ayub, and you're my good friend. Interestingly, this is the sixth time you're asking the same question.
Because it's an accountability question, Honorable Kimani Kuria.
I will not belabor on what I said earlier.
Yeah.
Because when you ask the same thing over and over again, and again you have the image of Mary Wamboi as on the photo of it, I wouldn't go to the politics of it. So I'll just rest it at that.
No,
but I want to address.
Okay.
But I want to address.
Honorable Kuria, I'll give you all the time to prosecute your case and make your substantial submissions here. We invited you with honor because we want answers. Look, you are a member of parliament paid by the Exchequer. You serve at a very influential position of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. In fact, for 2 weeks, I was present. You even never had a 5-4 consistent sleep time because you were looking into an issue that was affecting the Kenyan people. So the question I'm asking is, for accountability purposes, pull down the image from there. It's about the cost of the importation of the oil which came into the country, and even to a further point, because there are very glaring inconsistencies. Yesterday, the CS Linturi told the Senate that 150 kg bag of rice is retailing at 1,800 Kenya shillings. The previous Wednesday last week, the CS for East African Affairs said that is retailing, the same is retailing at 7,500 Kenya shillings. I mean, these are two government ministries, government officials who are giving out mixed signals over the same issue, which the president is so passionate about in bringing now the cost of living. It's just an accountability question, Honorable Kuria Kimani.
Yes, yes, I agree with you on that. And the advantage here I have is when the cabinet secretary was being grilled at the Senate, where my good colleague Honorable Boni Halwale here was.
He wasn't there. He wasn't present yesterday.
I'm just saying he was there. He's a Senate, for example. I was at the National Assembly doing the second reading and close by close of the finance bill, and that is why I actually did say that I don't feel competent enough to comment on this particular matter because I'm not a senator and I was not involved in that. But I want to address the issue that you raised about
go ahead.
The cost of living and the matters. I was very elated yesterday to see the president launch a school feeding program in Nairobi County. And that cost of that meal to those students means everything to them. We have seen a record of people saying that most families are actually only having 1 or 2 meals a day. And now elevating that cost of that meal for those students in Nairobi County, to me, is very huge. And what have we done? In this particular budget, there is actually an allocation of 5 billion shillings towards school feeding program. So, and the president has said we are going to match what the counties are going to do by the national government. And therefore, if we have at least our school-going children having that assurance of that meal a day in school, to me is a huge thing. And what is the ripple effect of it? It's not just the kids having that meal at school, but it is a person who is going to supply the maize and the beans, and the people are going to cook those meals, and the jobs that particular thing is going to create. And what is the relationship of that with what, for example, the finance bill did? I'm happy that you really were with us during public participation. We had members of the public coming and telling us we have other corporate institutions that are willing to invest in school feeding program as their corporate social responsibility. And I think one of the examples is that company, I forget its name, in Mombasa, that's doing that school feeding children for schools. So what we have actually done in the finance bill was to zero rate all food supplies for the school feeding program. So if you're going to find what the president launched yesterday in other counties of this particular country, we are going to reduce the burden on our parents. Junior secondary schools, when this administration came into office, we found a mess in JSS. We didn't know, there was no clear policy on whether junior secondary school was going to be domiciled in secondary school or in primary school. Okay. There was no budget allocation for it. There were no teachers. What has this administration done? We have increased our budget for junior secondary schools to 25.5 billion shillings from 15 billion shillings last financial year. So an additional 10 billion shillings is going to junior secondary school. We did the highest recruitment of teachers at that 5,000. And this budget of this financial year, again, is hoping to recruit an additional 20,000 teachers. So if we reduce now the burden, because what we're finding, the junior secondary school being expensive to parents, is that because there were no recruitment of teachers, some parents took their kids to that JSS. They have found that they were not learning, and what did? They took them out and took them to private schools, increasing the cost of these families on education. Now, with this additional allocation to junior secondary school,
yes,
with the additional recruitment of teachers, and with the school feeding program, and hopefully now it's going to go into other counties, we are lessening the burden to Kenyans and to taxpayers.
Yes, Dr. Khalwale. You have been taking notes.
Yeah, because the colleagues were saying very interesting things.
Yes.
This matter of KNTC,
yes,
I can see you've taken us back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be clear. The reason why prices of essential commodities shoot up, or where in the market you find that these commodities, there's a shortage, it is because of the need for better regulation. So what did Parliament do? It gave KNTC the mandate to strengthen the supply chain. So it is created as a government agency for procurement that, amongst other things, not only helps in finding markets, but also strengthens the small and medium scale enterprises and also promotes wholesale and retail trade. Now, this being the case, it then just takes us back to what we said at the beginning. What was the responsibility of the CEO and, by extension, the minister? Was to ensure that as the KNTC carries out its mandate, that it should do so within the procurement and the provisions of the Procurement and Disposal Act. And the minister said, and we have no reason to doubt him, that it was above board. It was competitive. So if some of the points you have raised, which are in your possession and you have not shared with us, if you had shared with us and we have read here, you will have challenged me.
Were you in the Senate yesterday? You would have gotten the documents.
I was on another national function in Naivasha. But
they are there. your colleague Mohammed Chute has them. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So once the institution that is charged with finding out whether the law was abused then comes out with that position, then it becomes the official position. You know, we are all members of Parliament, and we know that members of the public have this desire to help us to do better. They bring us documents. Those documents are not always true. They have to be verified. And that's why there is a process. The Speaker will say, okay, you have tabled the facts. What do you think are the facts? But let us subject them to verification. Yeah.
Okay. Honorable Mbadi.
Yes. Now you're back to me.
Yes, I'm back to you.
You see, first, I would want to persuade my colleagues who are in government or who are in the party forming the government that if we want to help this country, there are things that we need to look at. And one of them is corruption. Efficiency and effectiveness in use of resources needs to be given paramount weight, given a higher weight. And, you know, when Mheshimiwa Kimani talks about cracking the whip on KEMSA, the reports we are seeing is that they went for the wrong people and are cushioning the right people. And we are here. This thing is going nowhere from the way I've seen. In fact, even the talk about it has gone down. The issue of the bad sugar, 2 MPs were mentioned, and those 2 MPs are known. I have not even heard that they've been called, and they're the masterminds. You know, you are going for small people, and that is the tradition in this country. It did not start with this regime. You are going for small people, whom we can call omena, or small fish, and you're leaving the mbuta, the big fish. Where have the 2 MPs gone to? And the CS who has also been mentioned, why hasn't he written a statement? But I want to also say that the other thing that this government must do is to stop financing luxury and bloated government.
Okay. You will proceed with the luxury question.
Yes. No, I wanted to...
Yes, you will prosecute that. Yes. I'm still on you.
Yes.
I just want to take some clarity. The head of state, upon asking that question, I did pause that during the presidential interview in May. The following day on KEMSA, he took an action. Even the peers went home.
Thank you. You prompted him.
Thank you. That is our responsibility.
Thank you.
At the height of the pandemic, a similar scandal happened at the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority. And even the president then, Uhuru Kenyatta, gave a 21-day ultimatum for action to be taken.
Yes.
21 days is never.
Earlier on, you told Dr. Khalwale that we were never in government. Yes, you were never, because there were some people who were exercising authority. But you said you were friends, those who were in government.
Yes.
Why didn't you enjoy that cordial friendship to then prompt the then president to take action on KEMSA because public money was lost?
I want to speak as John Buddy. Go back to the records and see what I said about KEMSA. I was very categorical that those who have stolen money that was meant to help Kenyans out of a very serious pandemic must be prosecuted. And I still hold that position. I am not here as an apologist of Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yeah.
I did not participate. I did not help him run the government. There are certain mistakes that he made, and very fundamental. One of them is sinking this country into debt. And he was in that with William Ruto. So William Ruto cannot run away from that. But I will tell you also that even this kind of shows that we see presently, I call them shows because government is a government in perpetuity. Uhuru Kenyatta's tenure, people were arrested also. What we saw when Ruto came into power, they have all been released. What we hear is that there were political instigated arrests. I have no facts about it. But what I am saying is we must be serious about fight against corruption in this country. And we should not be apologetic.
Okay, Honorable Mbadi.
Yeah.
I get your point. The individual John Mbadi, if we get back to that Hansard, will get your record. You are for the arrest of the people who looted money at KEMSA then. But was it not wise to give ultimatum and not take action?
That was
by
not
the former
wise.
president.
If you ask me,
was it right?
If you give ultimatum,
yeah,
you must follow it and actualize it. And I would say that that was wrong for the head of state to give ultimatum and fail to follow through.
Okay. The other question that you have raised is that you said people were released from jails, and the Director of Public Prosecutions, now the Director General, who the former ODPP, the case against the then Madeira MP Rigathi Gachagua was all trumped up. Evidence is in court. I mean, the DCI official, Kuria Obadia, said I was forced by the then DCI Director, Kinoti, to trump up charges against the Madeira lawmaker, then now Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And that clearly was the politicization of an institution in the criminal justice system that ought to be just when it's handling Mbadi, when it's handling Kuria Kimani, when it's handling Dr. Khalwale, when it's handling Ayub. Why then were cases trumped up against people who are then deemed not to support the government of the day?
First of all, Ayub, you are speaking like I was in government. No, I have never been in government.
You said people were released.
Yes.
So that's
what I'm saying.
That was one of the major cases.
And if you heard me clearly, I qualified it by saying, I don't know whether they were released fairly or unfairly.
Okay, to qualify it, the affidavit in court by Kuria Obadia of the DCI told the court, through affidavit, a sworn-in document, that he was forced by the then DCI Director George Kinoti to trump up charges against Madeira lawmaker Rigathi Gachagua. Was it fair? I mean,
I would not be surprised if tomorrow Rigathi Gachagua is not the deputy president, and the same Obadia signs another affidavit.
Okay, we go by the documents.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
So, it's not right. We all agree then, before you proceed to your point, because you had a point to proceed to. So it's not right, we all agree here on this set and in any other discussion, that the respect for independence of institutions in Kenya, born out of Katiba 2010, must be respected, because they are all holding up under intense pressure from you, members of the political class. That is a problem.
Have I said anything contrary to that?
Well, I don't mean blanket condemnation, but politicians in this country have the art of not respecting.
And I agree. And that is why I say, and it starts with the presidents. It starts with the presidents, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President Ruto, all the leaders. Let us live to the spirit of the Constitution. Okay. And I have said it many times, but allow me to
had another point here. Proceed,
my
please.
points.
Yeah.
Yes. You see, I talked about financing luxury and bloated government. We have seen President Ruto creating more positions, which Uhuru Kenyatta illegally created. And by the way, when CSS were created, we questioned it. It has not gone away. But again, what now Ruto has done is to increase the number, the luxury. Look at the CS for trade. He's always out there. And from what he says domestically, we are not even sure he's representing us well. So why should he even travel so much the way he does? In fact, I think he's doing more harm to us than good. But I wanted to correct some information that Boni Alwale has been giving now. This is the second time that KNTC is a regulator. Even by its very name, Kenya National Trading Corporation. It is a participant in trading activities and commercial activities and selling. A regulator does not sell commodities.
KNTC sells.
It does. And do you know, Ayub, you probably may not be aware, that Director General of NYS has issued a memo, a circular, on 16th of June, directing that NYS must now procure all dry food from KNTC, making it a single-sourced products, commodities. So the question is, why can't NYS procure competitively? They even have a list of other suppliers, and the suppliers are complaining. Why is that so? Why don't we be allowed to compete competitively with KNTC? It is because KNTC is now a conduit for those who are presently in power to make money.
Okay.
It is theft. It is completely reaping our economy, and we are just watching. Okay. And that is why you see all this. And by the way, Senator Alwale was saying that is the media, Yeah. Even the investigation at the Senate came as a result of the media expose. And you can see when the courier came, there are questions to answer. So we should not vilify and attack media necessarily. They are helpful.
Okay, thank you. The media is helpful, for democracy dies in darkness. Let's take a look at the feedback, and I take your final remarks here on the broadcast. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here's what you are saying. Coming up shortly on your screens, Babu Michelle K says, it's clear that the public participation that was conducted before the tabling of the finance bill this year to Parliament was just formality. Most pressing issues that Kenyans wanted changed were not changed. And as Osoro said, serikali haishindwi. Bobo Tionowine says we are in a deep crisis because of the mistakes made by the last regime, and Kenya Kwanza has only one option of implementing Finance Bill 2023 to rectify the mistakes and at the same time enable them fulfill promises they made to the Kenyan people.
Correct.
Sir Nixon Dogure says MPs have snubbed our pleas, including that of not increasing fuel from the current 8 to 16%. This is not the kind of representation envisaged in Article 1 and 2 of our Constitution. Seems like we are on our own while they are on their stomachs.
Hey.
Engineer Lazaro says, on Halwale, Kenyans are taking records of lawmakers who supported these punitive bills. We will revisit when things fail to work out. Remember, good number of investors are already closing down their premises. Some are doing retrenchments. Samuel Owuot says, no legislator should speak on my behalf. More taxes should be on fuel, cooking oil, cosmetics, cigarettes, alcohol, and a few things here and there for Kenya to grow fast. It's time we became the elephants of the continent. Honorable Lilian Sioe says it's important to note that while VAT has seen an overall increase to 16%, we may occasion a spike in fuel prices. Taxes on fuel, including the Railway Development Levy and the Import Declaration Fee, have been reduced. Okelo Mwalimu says this government has failed hustlers by pressing punitive tax system. Increase in price of imports, especially petrol, will fuel inflation, which would worsen our BOP. Of no country would reluctantly import inflation. Hustlers will soon become the paupers. Jobs will be lost. Oh, poor Kenyans, he says. Godi Barasa Were says it's the hope of every Kenyan that as we go through this painful economic surgery, we will get a long-term reprieve at the end. The tough terrain and the high cost of living we are experiencing now shouldn't be in vain. Charlo Wood Rossi says raising fuel tax from 8 to 16% is very painful to Kenyans, but nothing can be done because the government needs to raise money. It has to be done, and what we need to do is to accept and move on. Kenyans need to tighten their belts because it's going to be tough. Ken Nyaminde says the clause in the BBI that was stopping the civil servants from trading with government would have reduced corruption drastically, but it was rejected. These are the consequences. Brian Chemwa says increased VAT can lead to a decline in consumer spending. Consumers may cut back on non-essential purchases or switch to cheaper alternatives, negatively affecting businesses, particularly those in discretionary sectors here in the country. Start with you.
Yes. We carried out the most robust public participation in the history of this country. Every Kenyan knows that there is something called a finance bill. It is not an invention of Kenya Kwanza administration. It is not an invention of Kuria Kimani. This is something that has, and Honorable Boni Halole did say, that President Moi did 24 of them, President Kibaki did 10 finance bills, President Uhuru did 10 finance bills. But the first finance bill of Kenya Kwanza administration is the most talked in the whole country, which means that as government, we are very open to having an open conversation with this particular, on any matters that are of public concern. Secondly, out of the clauses, the many clauses that are in the bill, the Committee of Finance and National Planning actually did 86 amendments. And I will talk about, for example, some of the things we did: the digital content monetization, the proposed withholding tax of 15%, reduce that to 5%. The punitive measure that was on the bill that proposed that if you had a tax appeal, then you were required to deposit 20% of the tax that you're required to pay. We deleted that particular clause so that we make taxpayers have access to the justice system without the punitive way of requiring them to make a deposit. So, withholding tax, VAT and excess duty was payable within 24 hours as proposed in the bill.
Okay.
We increased that from 24 hours to 5 working days. For the first time, we actually did zero rate maize flour, wheat flour, and cassava flour. And that is what came up from public participation. We've cleaned up that clause. There's no longer confusion whether wheat flour, maize flour, and cassava flour is tax exempt or zero rated. The turnover tax that was proposed to have the lower threshold of 500,000 shillings, we actually increased that threshold to 1 million shillings. And these are among the array of amendments that we actually made.
Is that after hearing from the hustlers?
Of
who
course,
would have
yes.
been affected otherwise, because mathematically that would come to about 1,400, 1,400 a day, or 500,000 businesses annually.
It's 1,800 and
1,370 thereabout, yes.
Yes. So we actually increased that to 1 million shillings. And that, I could go on and on about all the amendments we made. The shift from tax exemption to zero rate. And again,
thank you.
Not a CPA band here wants the Azimio side to take credit for that. But unfortunately, being a CPA, I know absolutely the difference between zero rating and exempt. And I was very particular in my mind from the word go. We cannot use tax exempt and zero rate interchangeably. And we did make sure that all those particular products and services that are used for manufacturing that are essential to Kenyans, we took them to the first schedule, making them zero rated.
Yes, Honorable Mbadi.
The process of public participation is not in doubt. It was done very well, in my view. And not only those who presented their views to the committee, but Kenyans engaged a lot, even in the media, and there was a lot of debate. But this didn't just happen. It was because of the clauses that were in the bill that caused national debate. Probably the other bills have not been so offensive, the finance bills, as this year's finance bill was. But again, I want to say that even as I agree and admit that there are some amendments that were made, and a lot of them as a result of also our pressure. Because remember, this government said that there would be no change, even a comma. The president said he would not allow any change on the finance bill. Rigathi Gachagua said the same, who is the deputy president. I remember the chief whip of the majority side said they are going to pass it without even a comma, serikali ashindwi, and all that. But because of the pressure from our side, and we did put down the points, I will tell you, for the first time, I think, Azimio Economic Council, where I sit, we came up with a raft of issues, a lot of which you have picked, like the turnover tax, but still you have left the rate at 3% and many other things. I don't want to go into the details. The VAT, with the zero rating now being taken to exempt ETC, maize flour, there was confusion and we raised it. But again, the critical ones were not touched. The critical ones are two. That Kenyans talked about more than anything else. If we were listening to Kenyans, then the VAT on petroleum products would have been left at 8%. And the issue of housing levy has been made worse, by the way. The 1.5% we are being told, the earlier one was 3% on basic salary, not gross, and it was capped at 2,500 for the employee. Now, what you have done, Ayub, and I know your salary is reasonably okay. I don't know the exact amount. It looks. I will tell you for a fact that 1.5% on gross salary is not a small amount for many people. And taxing gross is actually not the right thing to do. You should tax basic salary of people in terms of levies, not in terms of pay as you earn.
Thank you.
So, that is the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalwale.
Very briefly, I want to appeal to members of parliament that when you come to this show, you should be mindful of the fact that parliament gives you a unique platform where you have the latitude, my brother Bandi, to take action against your so-called mbunda, the big fish.
Yes.
Why have you not moved in parliament against those big fish? You know what you can do about those MPs that you say exist. You should have taken action. Instead of doing that in parliament, you come here and glaringly you want to support an illegality called politicization and weaponization of the fight against corruption. We will never win that fight if we go that route. Secondly, Buddy, time you stopped living in denial about the role you played in messing this country. The handshake government was your government. In fact, key...
There was no handshake government. There was a government.
Yes. Key parliamentary committees were chaired by ODM, up to and including the Finance and Budget Committee was chaired by Honorable Gladys Wanga.
Not Budget Committee, Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee was chaired by Honorable Gladys Wanga. And finally, but not least, this issue of Chief Administrative Secretaries. Why it is stuck in the media, it is because there are two opinions and everybody thinks they are right. So now the matter is in High Court and the Constitution of Kenya provides that when there is a lack of agreement on an opinion of interpretation, the High Court is going to make a determination.
Thank you.
And once they do, we will say they're either there or they're not going to be there or they're going to be there in this many numbers or fewer numbers.
Bonnie, I was questioning whether that expenditure is necessary, not whether it should be legal or not.
Okay. The expenditure part is what also Kenyans are concerned about because they will go for billions of shillings in payment because of the salaries and other benefits. We end it. You are used to order in the precincts of parliament. Let's have some orders. Honorable Kuria Kimani is the Molo lawmaker as well as the chair of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure. Honorable John Badi, nominated 20 years now, heading to 20 years in parliament.
Not nominated.
Not as nominated. Yeah. by the way, I'm chair of Public Accounts Committee.
Thank you.
And he is
and Dr. Bone Khalwale is the Senator Kakamega County.
And the Chief
Whip at the National Assembly, at the Senate. Thank you. Your time is all appreciated. And thank you as well for watching the broadcast and your feedback coming here on the broadcast. What's Cooking is up next, and you will be with Chef here on the broadcast after the break. Many thanks for watching. We'll see you next week here on the broadcast. Good morning.